I've also conducted a lot of training, but most of this is in relation to training that I was doing myself. The first training package I delivered, entitled Logistical Physics, was delivered to two different audiences. I first delivered it to my employer, and then subsequently I delivered it to my employer's main client. It focused on damages and hazards to and by freight. It took a look at the cause and effect of many aspects of motion, starting with the very obvious such as inertia, but also looking into some more curious things like why does freight travel backwards in the back of a truck? Not only was my employee happy for me to make this presentation to the client, but the client actually enjoyed it themselves. They even alluded to the fact that I could have given some demonstrations to some of their own people on how to deliver presentations. I only needed to deliver the presentation once as a requirement for Certificate 4 in warehousing and logistics. When I started the course, I was just trying to move forward in an industry that I was familiar with. But then came a time in my life when I realised this is not where I was meant to be. This is not what I was meant to be doing. So 2003 was a time where I started to recognise myself. I started to understand who I was and what my true aptitude was, and I wanted to develop that. But that wasn't going to happen where I was working. I had to move out of that industry. I tried to move forward in that industry with HR-based progression, but that just was not going to happen. In relation to the statement of final results that we have here, I was actually very lucky to get a pass in Coordinate Quality Customer Service at all. I was quite sick at the time, and what I handed in was just a rough draft. It was basically chicken scratching, so I was quite lucky to get the pass. In relation to develop and maintain a safe workplace, I simply didn't finish it. It was just a case of it was time for me to move on, and I just dropped everything and wanted to make a fresh start. I wanted to do some training as a return to work coordinator. So I delivered a pitch to my employer and basically negotiated for them to pay for that course, and in exchange for that I was to deliver a catalogue of competency. The nature of the catalogue focused on the nature of the work that was carried out at a client's workplace. The pitch itself was another presentation entitled Positive Placement, basically looking at why it was so important to invest in a return to work coordination program. A requirement of that course was to deliver another training session. I opted to do my session on ergonomics. Unlike this roughed out showcase, when it comes to presentations, it's something I do well at. Like a fish in water when it comes to doing the presentations. I feel comfortable and people enjoy participating in the presentations and I get good feedback. In which event I decided to do my Certificate 4 in Training and Assessment. As part of that training, I was required to do 2 presentations and a written training program. For my first presentation, I opted to address the 4 key elements of skill: physiology, development, technique and application. But since delivering this presentation over the years, I've come to realise that there is a more encompassing element that addresses all 4 of these items, and that is will. Where it comes to a physiological deficiency, we need to have the will to overcome that and find another way. Much like a Para-Olympian or Helen Keller, there's plenty of examples in history of people that have become great despite their physiological challenges. Whether it's physical, mental or spiritual, we need to have the willpower to invest in our development. Let's go for a run, for example. We'll go for a run. Who cares if it's raining? Big deal. It's only rain. You're just going to get a little bit wet. But it's about making that choice. We could go for a run or we could not go for a run. If we need to develop our mental capacity, We could be sitting on a couch watching a soap opera, or making a choice to watch a documentary or read a book or do some research. Spiritually, we could choose to be a recluse, or we could immerse ourselves in society and be part of society. But it's all about making that choice. It's all about having the willpower to make a proactive decision. Where it comes to the technique, we could go about our work just plodding along, oblivious to the outcome of what we're attempting to do, or we could have the willpower to improve, to make things more effective, more efficient. It's also about being brave enough to make those mistakes, brave enough to not fear getting in trouble. If we get in trouble, big deal. At least we've figured out what we need to do it right. And Thomas Edison, he was quite famous, and he's a big supporter of making mistakes. It took him a lot of attempts to try and invent the light bulb, and he valued that. I'm not sure if it was Edison or if it was Einstein, but there's a famous quote that goes something like, "Those who truly try at the very least succeed in trying, where those who do nothing achieve nothing," and that's very true. Even with all the physiology, development and techniques at hand, it still comes down to making a choice. It still comes down to will. So we could decide to do something, or we could decide not to do something. We could decide to do something well in the best possible way through our application of a task, knowing the right way, or we could take shortcuts. It all comes down to will. All four of these things come down to will in the end. This is very important to the employment and recruitment sector. We want people to show up for work. We want people to be committed. We need to be able to recognise that what motivates people and empower them and give them the incentive to become better. The second presentation I delivered was manual excavation. This involved identifying the environment in which we have to work, selecting the appropriate tools to that environment, and identifying risks. The written training program I put together was in relation to securing loads in the logistics industry. It looked at hitches, chains, tarpaulins and load binders. Here we have two surveys. The first one there was a requirement for my diploma of leadership and management, where I submitted the survey to 4 different recruitment agencies. The second one there was a requirement for micro business management. I submitted that survey to 10 different schools. Only one of them participated, but the feedback was quite gratifying. So you may ask yourself, what does this have to do with the employment or recruitment sector? Well, quite simply, I'm a guy who assesses situations and comes up with conclusions and solutions. This involves consultation, assessment, and making a pitch. These are all skills that are required in the recruitment and employment sector, regardless of whether that be in relation to manning or finding solutions that are required by the employer or the person who needs the assistance by way of recruitment. I'm not actually interested in the sales side of things. I'm more concerned with meeting needs, about assessing what the client needs and making that happen.